Stormy. It's time for the tea party. Hush, Tweedledee.
I've got one. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Oh dear, oh dear.
You must save Alice.
Wake up, Alice, wake up!
Mom? Dad? Alice? Mom! Father?
I can't see!
Get out, Alice!
Save yourself, Alice! Get out of the house!
Poor dear. After all these years, maybe that old rabbit will bring her around.
Save us, Alice!
Hello everyone, and this is the third episode of the WinsGamer. Today I'm going to take a look at Mcgee's Alice, and before we start up the gameplay, I'm going to show you the box here. As you can see, this is the first release, I believe, of Mcgee's Alice, because to my knowledge, they also released it in a smaller box, and I think they took her blade out for some reason and replaced it with a ice wand. I guess, I don't know, it was just too frightening to look at the store. I don't know. Not as if the skinny skeleton cat wasn't enough, I guess. This game was developed by Rogue Entertainment, I believe, and published by EA. And Rogue, to my knowledge, also did the expansion pack to Quake 2 called Ground Zero. Really like this box. It's probably one of my favorite boxes in my collection. I just love the artwork on it. I don't know if you can see that. Just on the spine itself, the cat, and then the heart with the red backdrop. I don't know, I just think it's a really cool looking box. This is one of the games where, when I was younger, looking at it at the store, just checking it out, I'm like, oh, I gotta get this game, but alas, my parents wouldn't buy it for me. I guess they thought I was too young for it. Oh well. Let's take a look at the inside. It's kind of an interesting box. There we go. Got the CD right in there. It's a 2-disc game. And I know there's one more. There we go. Looks like we got ourselves 2 booklets and a registration card. I don't know if that's going to do any good anymore. Some installation, gameplay, yeah, just your standard, I guess, how to get the game running, how to save, what to do if you break the game, how to reinstall it, I guess. I kind of like this book, though. It's very interesting. It's got this kind of almost personal feel to it. It's all written in cursive, as if it was like a journal. It's kind of cool to read through it. See how much Alice has gone mad, I guess. Some pictures. Yeah. Now, I have played the new one. Alice Madness Returns, I believe. And, I don't know, I thought it was fun. The gameplay was good. Just, I didn't really care much for the level design. And I didn't like how it would always tell me where to go, even though the only way I could go was that direction anyway, since there wasn't really any exploration in the game whatsoever. So that kind of annoyed me, but I still had some fun. But when it comes to Alice, This is the game I personally enjoy more. Alright, start up some gameplay for you.
There's a school inside the fortress where you'll find certain items for creating a concoction that will make you small.
What items exactly?
Items, girl. You'll know them when you see them. Speaking of seeing things, we should avoid the card guard's notice. Hang on. Damn it. We've been seen. Eventually, you must break through such walls. But for now, jump!
So, welcome to Wonderland. Definitely not the peaceful place that you remember from the book or the Disney movie. Now, the premise of Alice in Wonderland revolves around, from what I get out of the gameplay, is that Wonderland, which is the world she created from herself as a form of escape from the world, from the current world actually, and it has gone bad as a result of her current terrible state of mind, which is a result of what she blames herself from the tragedy of her family. Since she's the only one left alive, she basically brings on the weight of her family's death and puts it on herself. And since her current mental state is bad, Wonderland is thus reflecting what her mental state is. And it's up to her to bring peace back to Wonderland, and as the idea, if she brings peace back to Wonderland, her mental state would end up getting better as a result. In order for Alice to bring back harmony to Wonderland, she has to kill the Red Queen, who currently rules Wonderland with an iron fist. As Alice travels throughout Wonderland, she encounters all of her friends, who have also been twisted and tormented from her current mental state. When traveling through Wonderland, she will find a whole bunch of demons and evil entities that she has to kill in order to... What I kind of like about Alice is that all the enemies are fairly unique. I mean, you got your standard card enemies. I mean, these are your kind of grunts of Alice in Wonderland. They carry around these staffs that shoot bolts of energy that fire at Alice. You also got your flying demons, which basically fly around the world, and then they also scream at Alice with gusts of fury, if you call it, and damage her in the process, and kind of try to blow her off course and maybe even knock her off. They're very annoying, I guess you would say. You also got your standard red demons. They carry around these pitchforks and basically walk up to Alice and try to stab her. They're fairly weak and kind of, to me they seem like cannon fodder. They very rarely ever pose a threat, even when there's multiple of them. You then also got these other enemies that coat themselves in their own with their own coat, I guess, for lack of a better term. And when they open up, they fire these cold chains at Alice, which attempt to freeze her in her current state and leave her open and vulnerable to attacks from many other enemies. And these are only just a few of the enemies in the game. I mean, there's other kinds too, and they're all unique, and they all represent the current area that Alice is in. Like, if you're in a castle, you're going to encounter a lot of more of the Red Guards. Those are standard Queen's minions. And when you're out in the open, like traveling through like the forest or a canyon, to say, you'll encounter other various forms of enemies that represent that location. It is quite sad to see what happens to Alice and her close friends in Wonderland. Some of the most memorable to me are what happens to Rabbit. The White Rabbit, who is guiding Alice throughout Wonderland, ends up getting squashed by the raging Mad Hatter as he stomps throughout Wonderland and sees the rabbit, and without hesitation steps on it and squishes it till it's basically a pancake. Not a very happy scene.
Everyone I love dies violently. Unnaturally. I'm cursed. Why go on? I'll just hurt others.
No time for self-pity. Evade these savage soldiers and find Caterpillar.
And another one, to me, is what happens to the opposing queen of Wonderland. She gets kidnapped by the Red Queen, and with her famous, off with her head, actually takes the other queen, puts her in a guillotine, and literally chops her head off. And what is with the children in this game? Whenever Alice sees children, they're basically been lobotomized, and they're dancing around like mad, frantic little kids. It is quite odd, and I never really understood what that's supposed to be. Not every character in Wonderland faces a demise. Most of all the important ones are still here. You still have the famous Chester Cat, who helps Alice throughout Wonderland and gives her cryptic comments on what to do next. And of course you got the White Rabbit, who is crazy with being on time. The Mad Hatter. And Caterpillar. And of course the famous Queen of Hearts, who wants to chop everybody's head off.
I don't like it. Caterpillar
But
is just
I don't want to
interfering.
spoil what the Queen of Hearts looks like, as it's quite surprising and very disturbing. Now, let's get to the real neatness of the game. The weapons. All the weapons in this game are very creative and all extremely unique. The best feature of the weapons is the fact that all of them, well, majority of them, except for a select few, have a secondary attack, bringing their use up to double. First up is my personal favorite, which is the Vorpal Blade. With that weapon, you can choose either slice and dice your enemies until they fall apart into bloody pieces. But if the enemy is farther away, you can also throw the Vorpal Blade with doubling the damage. It's your all-purpose weapon and my personal favorite. Next up, you got the playing cards. Their primary mode of use is when Alice uses them, she throws the cards at her enemies with great precision, and they actually home onto the enemies. They also fire with great rapid succession. Their secondary mode of use is they end up being used like a shotgun. Mostly used for when enemies are up close and you want to fire multiple cards at once, but you want to do it at the exact same time. So what Alice does is she takes many cards and actually throws them all at her enemies, and they don't necessarily home in with as great precision, but they still attack with a great force of use. I basically call it the shotgun form of the cards. For your third weapon, you got a croquet mallet. When Alice has that, she runs up to her enemies and bashes them upside their head with it. Their secondary use, she takes a ball and actually hits it. As a result, the ball lunges at its target and knocks it unconscious or ends up killing it. A fairly nice weapon and very quick, and doesn't use up that much mana. The next one, and probably one of my next up favorite, but also has deadly use, is the Jack-in-a-Box. With this weapon, you actually throw the box and it explodes with fiery use. And you must be careful with it, as it can easily burn yourself with it. The secondary mode to use is Alice drops the box, the jack pops out, and spins around in a circular motion, breathing fire at every single enemy there. Very deadly, but also very deadly to you too. Now, what is Wonderland without some form of a magical weapon? With this next one, you get yourself an Ice Wand, an excellent weapon for when Alice has many enemies in front of her. You can use the primary mode to blast enemies with a cold stream of ice, freezing them in the process. It is very deadly, and it does not use up as much mana as you would think, but it can quickly drain your mana down to nothing if you're not careful. Its next mode, Ice Wand, actually brings up a barrier of ice and basically protects Alice from any frontal assault. Not used very often, but it can be fairly useful. Next up is a child favorite, the jacks. These spiky jumping jacks will bounce everywhere and attack as many enemies as it can without relent. It is very deadly and very useful, but you must use it with care, as Alice herself can be susceptible to the damage from the jumping jacks. The second mode of the jumping jacks is very similar to the cards, as Alice throws many jacks at her enemies and ends up stabbing them in the process. Very deadly and very menacing. The next weapon is a very powerful weapon, but also not useful as you would think, as me personally, I have a hard time with it actually summoning demons. This weapon is known as the Diabolical Dice. As I stated before, you use it to summon demons. You throw the dice on the ground and demons pop out and attack enemies with deadly force. But be careful, as these enemies will also attack you if there is no enemies close by. The second most powerful weapon in the game, the Jabberwock Staff. What's interesting about this weapon is that Alice actually has to make it herself. When she's traveling through Wonderland, she'll actually pick up pieces of the staff and use it to create a weapon known as a Jabberwock Staff. The first mode of the Jabberwock Staff is Alice holds it and fires a beam of energy at her enemies. It is extremely deadly, but also drains mana very fast. The second mode, Alice takes the staff and shoots flames in the sky, and flames end up falling towards the enemies and destroying everything on the ground. But be careful with it, as it can also damage you in the process. Now, the most deadly weapon in the game, and also a secret weapon, is the Blunderbuss. This weapon only has one mode of fire, and what it does, it shoots a giant ball, if you will, out of the gun and lunges towards enemies, and killing everything in the process. Its downside is that it takes all your mana in one shot. So thus, you must use it wisely if you have this weapon. What I like about Wonderland are the areas. To me, they seem kind of surreal and almost beautiful in a way. Some of the most interesting and memorable to me are the mining town, which is the first level in the game. As you travel through it, you encounter some of the villagers, and you can actually speak with them a little bit and learn about the Queen and their current state of living. It's quite sad and depressing at the same time, which kind of go hand in hand, I guess. Another area is a laboratory, which is, I think, like the second or third level in the game. Another one is the Valley of Tears. This one I find very interesting, if you will. In this level, Alice actually has to float and travel on a leaf that is being supported by her own tears. It is quite surreal, and the enemies in this area are quite interesting, as you gotta face off some ants with guns and these stupid flying little beetle things that drop bombs on you that are actually acorns. I hate those. Another one that's quite interesting and very fun to travel through is the Chess City. Here you actually get to see the opposing forces at war with each other. You got the Red Queen, who is trying to kill the White Queen, or Gray Queen, if you will. I really don't know what she's called. And this is also the area where you see the Queen behead her arch nemesis. And lastly, and not least, the other most interesting area to me is the level that is inhabited by the Mad Hatter. This place doesn't make much sense. It also houses a lot of the kids that you first encountered in the laboratory where they get lobotomized. Again, I have no idea why the kids are here, but they are quite disturbing to think about. Like I already hinted at, I really think Alice has some great things in it. You got the great writing, the characters are extremely interesting, and the level design is quite superb. Alice does have some excellent writing in it. And I'll show you some of my most favorite chat star quotes that I think are in the game.
You've gone quite mangy, Cat, but your grin's a comfort.
And you've picked up a bit of an attitude. Still curious and willing to learn, I hope.
Wonderland's become quite strange. How is one to find her way?
As knowing where you're going is preferable to being lost, ask. Rabbit knows a thing or two, and I myself don't need a weather vane to tell which way the wind blows. Let your need guide your behavior. Suppress your instinct to lead. Pursue, Rabbit. Here's a riddle. When is a croquet mallet like a billy club? I'll tell you, whenever you want it to be. Your knife is necessary, but not sufficient. Always collect what's useful. Reject only your ignorance, and you may survive. Look straight ahead, or askance, whichever way you choose. You must always look in the right direction. Doors have locks. Locks need keys, which you don't have. Let's hope the doors are open.
And if not, there may be more than one way to skin a cat, if you'll pardon the expression.
Most unpleasant metaphor. Please avoid it in future.
If you have already not picked up this game, I highly recommend it. If you bought the game on the 360 or PS3, you may already own it, as EA re-released the game on that platform. And from what I hear, it plays quite well. I mean, the game itself is basically at its heart a platformer, and platformers usually play very nicely with the gamepad. As for your PC players like me, you will most likely have to rebuy the game from either Amazon or eBay. And the game is really not that expensive. It's just if you are okay with just getting the CD, then you'll be fine, which really is all you need. However, if you want to collect the box, you're probably looking at about $20 to $40 depending on condition, and I would not pay no more than $20, $25 for a full complete copy, as it's not really that rare of a game, but it's not super common either, so it does have some demand. Before I go, there's just a couple of things left I would like to mention. Firstly, I would recommend that you go to the mod database site and download the Alice Madly Enhanced mod along with the Madly Enhanced 1.7 patch, as this will bring the game to a higher resolution and look much better on a current PC. And on top of that, I would also recommend going to the Widescreen Gaming Forum site and looking up Alice to see how you can get this game running in a 16:9 ratio or a 16:10 ratio and up to a 1080p resolution. I think I've rambled on enough about this game, so I think I'll call it the video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you subscribe if you like this video.